Good morning, everyone. I am Marsha Lacco with the Division of Environmental Assistance and Customer Service. I want to welcome you to day 2 of our ESI Conference. We hope you were able to join us for yesterday, but if you were not able to, we will have those recordings and slides up on our website momentarily so that you can review them. If this is your first day with us, welcome. Just a few things about the GoToWebinar platform. We've got everybody muted so that we don't hear any background noise. You can adjust your volume and audio settings over on the right, and you control the entire control panel. You can get that out of your way by pressing that red arrow at the top. Under the handout section, there's 2 slides that also visually show you how to control the control panel if you need to. All right, we want to again thank Waste Reduction Partners and Land of Sky for helping us host the webinars on the GoToWebinar platform. And we're going to get started this morning with a bang. We're going to have our recycling folks tell you what's going on in the recycling markets. So we've got Mel Gillis and Mike Green. And I believe Mike is starting off. So Mike has been a business development specialist with NCDEQ Recycling Business Assistance Center since 2013, where he specializes in recycling markets. And he spent the 7 years prior to that with the City of Greensboro Recycling Program and helped to launch their ABC Recycling Service in 2008. Mike is a graduate of Appalachian State University. Mel is our recycling and education and outreach specialist and is a messaging leader who provides resources to help local government, schools, businesses, and the recycling industry promote waste reduction and educate their audiences. She has helped hundreds of corporations refine their waste diversion programs and train employees and businesses of every size on recycling, composting, and hard to recycle, sorting, and collection systems. Last fall, she helped launch our Recycle Right NC campaign, which she's going to speak to this morning, a statewide anti-contamination campaign to clean up recycling that reached more than 1 million people and accumulated 30,000 interactions on Facebook alone. Mel has over 30 years of experience on the front lines of recycling. She is a unique expert on making the world of waste diversion efficient, practical, and easy to navigate. So Mel, I am going to turn the presenter rights over to you. Oh, no, wait a minute, Mike's starting. Hold on, sorry, technical glitch here. Okay, Mike, you should have it.
All right. Let's see. What can everyone see now?
We can see the slide view, so you need to do presenter view. There it is.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Good to go. Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Green. I am part of NCDEQ in the Recycling Business Assistance Center. I basically work with companies that collect, process, or manufacture with recycled material in the state. So I've talked to a lot of the folks here, and I've presented to ESI a few times. So I thought I would just kind of go through some of the things as far as, hold on, what has changed and what has not changed. So what's the same? You will likely need more than one recycling vendor. Truckload quantity is king. That's what everybody's looking for. You're going to need space for storage. Aim for mixed loads. When you're talking to your recycler, try and find out if they can take more than one thing so that you can hopefully send them loads with more than just one thing in them. Communication and time challenges. For a lot of the folks here, recycling is not your only job, although it can be time consuming. Vendors may have a million questions, or vendors can be unresponsive, especially during difficult markets. Some more things that are the same. Your problem recyclables are most likely to not be a high value product. Markets fluctuate. Your problem material is not worth what it may have been several years ago. It's still a buyer's market. China is becoming less of an issue, and we're going to cover some of that here shortly. Cost avoidance is what you're really aiming for here. Best case scenario is a cost neutral solution for your recycling, but in the current market conditions, you will likely have to pay to have your material recycled. All right, so what your recycling vendors need you to know, what your recycling vendors need to know. They are looking to find out what item do you have? What is it? Is it mixed with anything else? Is there anything else stuck to it? How much do you have? And how frequently do you have it? So the thing I usually like to look for, and it's fairly easy to guesstimate, is a Gaylord box. How long would it take you to fill one of those Gaylord boxes? If you can tell the vendor that, that tells them a lot of what they need to know. How is it prepared? Is it in Gaylord boxes? Is it baled? If it's loose, that's likely not to be very appealing to a recycler. And is the item free from contamination? So what your recycling vendor wants you to know. They're probably going to need more separation than they have in the past. You used to be able to have a mixed plastic bale, and now with the markets being a little trickier, but getting better, they definitely want to have some of that separated. There's less room for sorting errors. It can take a lot of the value out if you've got bad material in there. Zero tolerance for contamination, and they want you to be able to educate and enforce the education with your employees. So what does the main office need to know? Recycling is not free. Recycling should not be counted on as revenue, and recycling is a utility like water, power, and internet. So something that I've been trying to get going for a while, I've finally got an example that I can share with everybody of a consolidation program. So there's a brewery waste consolidation system that's going to be going in place. I can't tell you where and I can't tell you who's involved yet, but it's 9 breweries in a 4-county region who all had the same common waste of about 4 or 5 hard to recycle items. What they're doing is they found a consolidation point. They are taking all of their material to this point, and basically quantity is creating a market for hard to recycle items. Everything's impossible until it's done. So if you are looking, for consolidation ideas, definitely catch up with me. I'll be more than happy to discuss hard to recycle consolidation, where you could possibly team up with other manufacturers and other industrial plants in your area. So just some statewide recycling quantities and markets updates that I wanted to pass on to everybody. This is the 20-year disposal forecast for municipal solid waste and construction and demolition. The bottom line is population. That is increasing. They're also seeing a large increase on the top line of MSW and C&D waste. That's basically just showing the importance of recycling and trying to keep as much as possible out of the MSW landfills. If you've wanted to kind of track traditional recyclable material, we've been doing that. You can see since 2000, 2001, we've been able to track with the lighter color being fiber, the darker color being containers. Characterization of local government recovery. just to kind of show you what's going on in your communities, about 50% of the recycled material by weight is organics, and that's usually from a yard waste program, collecting leaves and branches, things like that. But of the other breakdown, you can see the breakdown of different items. Fiber is a big part of that. Let's see. So 5-year pricing trend for recyclable fiber commodities. Um, you can kind of catch everything since 2015 and see the different ups and downs. If you look in March of 2020, you'll notice there was a big spike in fiber value in March. And it was kind of interesting to be able to watch and identify exactly why that happened. And that was the great toilet paper shortage of March 2020. We also have the 5-year pricing trend for recyclable container commodities. You can see that there's a bit of an uptick in the HDPE natural and aluminum in the past bit. So when I mentioned China earlier, we did a survey this year and we were able to figure out where's recycling going since the international markets have shut down for the most part. We were really fascinated to figure out that almost 60% of it stays in North and South Carolina, with 80% of recycled material staying in the Southeast. That goes a long way to show that there are end markets in the Southeast that we are relying on more than international markets. That means that everything is starting to stabilize. We're going to start seeing the beginning of your recyclables being a little more valuable than they were. So this is great news for everyone that's kind of watching the markets. So some of the good news, statewide focus on contamination and education. Mel's going to cover some of that next. The Southeast is strong and growing domestic markets. And the stronger our region gets, the less dependence we're going to have on China, meaning the more value that your material will have. Recyclers and MRFs are investing in facilities and equipment. As we saw that domestic infrastructure and MRFs were very important to increasing market value, we put a lot of concentration into specific grants to build this infrastructure so that down the road we can get to a market recovery a little bit quicker. New fiber processing will be online very soon. Basically, there's still a demand in China for the fiber market that they shut off. So the Chinese companies have been coming to America. In the Southeast, they are opening up several paper plants that have been mothballed for years. And there's about, very soon, there will be a dramatic increase in the demand for different paper items. So keep a lookout for that. A little word from our waste reduction partners, friends. The Complete the Cycle Challenge, it's a new campaign where they're reviving the Buy Recycled campaign. They're going to be assisting businesses with recycled content sourcing, purchasing toolkits, promoting NC manufacturers that use recycled items in their products. Contact Jan Harden for that information with Waste Reduction Partners. And finally, a word from our buddy Tom Rhodes. Don't forget about North Carolina Waste Trader. He has been stepping up the focus on that over the past several months, and we are seeing some more listings. We're getting more eyes on that website. So definitely consider using that for some of your hard to recycle items. With that, I am going to hand it over to Mel, and thank you all for tuning in.
Good morning, everybody. This is Mel, and I'm just here to talk to you guys a little bit about the Recycle Right campaign here in North Carolina. I hope everybody can see my screen now.
Yes, we can, Mel. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. 1 second. All right, let's see if we can get this to advance. And it's not cooperating. Give me just a minute, everybody, while I find out what's up.
Can you find, there it is, Mel.
I think we're there. 1 second. All right. I wish, anybody know how I can get rid of this little box here so you guys don't have to look at that too? Oh, here, I think I've got it.
We don't see, as I say, Mel, we don't see the control panel for GoToWebinar. Yeah,
that's good news. Right, thanks for bearing with me for a second while I got the technology going. All right, so we're going to learn a little bit today about the Recycle Right campaign that launched last fall here in North Carolina. We're going to share some tools and resources and services that we can offer at DEECS to support your operations and your employees. I think they asked me to talk today because I'm supposedly the recycling education outreach specialist for DEECS, but I also have a lot of background in industry. I was the executive director of a couple of thrift stores, and my job was to figure out, with a daily changing inventory that we could not predict, how to keep stuff coming in the door, and so how it would flow in and then where it would go. And a lot of times what I was left with and my employees were left with was a whole lot of stuff that we didn't want to send to the landfill, but that we couldn't sell on the floor. So we had to figure out how to recycle it. So I became sort of a de facto expert as a result of that over the course of several years. I worked also at EcoCycle, which is one of the oldest and largest recycling nonprofits in the country. They're in Boulder, Colorado, and they had an actual material recovery facility. So I ran tours of that facility, was very acquainted with the daily operations of recycling infrastructure. We also hauled compost and recycling and hard to recycle materials. So those slides that Mike was sharing with you about what one of your recycling vendors might want to know, those questions were questions that I asked our customers every day. And I was the head of the commercial sector sustainability department at EcoCycle. So I worked hand in hand with companies like Lockheed Martin, Whole Foods, Google, figuring out waste diversion strategies, working on operations setups in the warehouses and on the floor for the employees so that they could have good sorting systems. And then I also trained thousands of employees across Boulder and that area of Colorado in how to utilize those recycling systems. When I got here to this job a couple years back, that was coming home for me. I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina. So it was great to be back in this neck of the woods. And right away, it became real apparent that our folks, our local governments, were asking us for some support in getting some contamination education out there. So we developed something called Recycle Right NC. It was a 10-week statewide anti-contamination campaign for local governments to execute that culminated last fall on America Recycles Day. It educated the public about contamination and how to recycle right. And it was established to counteract the relentless stream of negative press around recycling that really unfurled around the time of the China National Sword a couple of years back. And so this is a sample of the headlines that were deluging us on a daily basis. Our local governments were quite overwhelmed by these headlines, and most of them were pretty sensationalist, but not all completely based in fact. Certainly, recycling didn't end. No one killed recycling. You know, there were these headlines about programs cutting the recycling right and left. That was not actually the case. It was a small percentage of local governments that had to let the recycling programs go. But what was true and what wasn't getting a lot of press was that wish cycling was up. Wish cycling is when you're putting something in the bin and you're hoping that it's going to get recycled down the way, even if you're not really sure if that item is recyclable. And wish cycling kind of came to be a trend in the recycling industry over the course of about a decade. Single stream recycling came online in a lot of communities. Suddenly we had much higher participation in recycling, but very little actual education on what to put in the bin. And that combination of a whole lot of participants with not a lot of education led to a tremendous amount of wish cycling and contamination. In addition, we had for many years booming overseas markets, and we were shipping our stuff overseas, and it was kind of out of sight, out of mind. We had a buyer, and so we weren't too worried about what was going on with it on the flip side. Plastics proliferation definitely went up over the last decade with the cost of oil being down and natural gas being very affordable to make those plastics. So we started packaging our broccoli in plastic kind of overnight. And there was a huge zero waste movement on social media. So a lot of influencers out there, a lot of moms saying, you know, hey, I've got a family of 10 and I've only made a mason jar of waste in the last year and a half. Which, you know, meant that a whole lot of what they were putting into the recycling bin probably wasn't recyclable. But everybody started to think, maybe I could be doing that too, right? So this cultural sort of shift happened where we started thinking everything can be recycled. And that was not really the right message to be out there. What we want people to know is that when you're in doubt, you need to throw it out. We shouldn't pop everything in the bin that has a recycling symbol on it. So during that time, some recycling myths evolved, and I'm going to counter some of those with some truths. One is that recycling is going to save us. It's going to be the thing that's going to get us out of our waste crisis. And the reality, which you might not always think you would hear from someone like me, is that recycling is a huge part of a municipal solid waste strategy, but it's just one of our R's. We also have things like reduce and reuse and repair, and also other strategies like composting or yard waste and debris or construction and demolition. So there's lots of different things that go into looking at how to deal with our solid waste. Another myth was that recycling was free or that it should be always profitable. That was true while the markets were good, but markets go up and they go down. And the reality is that recycling does have a cost, just like any other utility, public utility that we utilize. We're doing it all right and we're doing it all wrong is another big myth that we have in the recycling world. People tend to think, you know, it's going great or it's going terrible. And the reality is that contamination must be addressed. We do put a lot of things in the bin that we shouldn't, and that we need to talk about that and get that message out to folks. Another myth is that recycling is really complicated. It's super confusing, and that it's hard to know, and that it takes an expert to really understand all these plastic codes. And the reality is that there are really only a few items, about 9, that are reliably recyclable. And it's kind of a simple thing to know what those things are. And we'll go over that today. Final myth is that recycling is different from place to place, and what we've actually found, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, is that there are way more similarities than differences between local programs, and we're starting to focus more in our education on those similarities. So with what happened with the China National Sword and the bad press, and then this sort of wish cycling culture that had evolved, we had a lot of problems out there. We had bad press around the recycling. We had these confusing guidelines and public education tools that weren't really well thought out. Local governments had limited resources to fight back against all this. Contamination costs were going through the roof. And we had a lot of misinformed citizens and press and public officials. So, you know, just hammering this home, recycling was threatened by widespread, expensive, and unchecked contamination, confusing lists, no unified messaging, and a lack of sustained and consistent education. That contamination was driving those costs up. And what we started to think at our office was, wait a minute, can we work together with uniform messaging to fight our common enemy, which is contamination? And that gave birth to the Recycle Right North Carolina campaign. So we created a set of informational and educational tools for local implementation. 225 local governments participated in the campaign. This greatly we took little bets on our team about how many local governments we thought would participate. We figured we would be lucky to get 50. I think our highest bidder in the office said maybe we'd get 100. We got more than 225 to sign up. That was amazing. And not only was that amazing, but then we reached a million people. Our first big post got over 80,000 views. We were stunned by the response. So we thought we were doing what the local governments were asking us to do, and then we did it, and we saw tremendous results. We designed accepted material lists that could be customized for each local government if their list was a little bit different. But when we have cart tagging program to go along with that. So these are the materials that we have, these templates in the office that any local government in the state can utilize. But when we started putting these together, we figured, oh, we got to go to each material recovery facility in the state. There were 14 of them at the time, and so we thought, well, we'll design a sign for each one of those, and they'll probably be really different because our understanding was that the MRFs were all taking different stuff. And we created a MRF shed map so that anybody in the state, any resident, any local government, any person out there, any elected official can go to that map, tap on it, and then see their recycling guidelines for their area. So this is all divided up according to whatever the material recovery facility is that they are serviced by. But what we found, and this was a shocker, was that these 14 lists were not that different. In fact, out of the 14 material recovery facilities, 7 of the lists were identical. They accepted the same stuff. 2 of them said we're not taking glass. And the rest just had really tiny differences. Like Sunoco says, we're gonna take clamshells and chip cans because we make clamshells and chip cans on the flip side, so we need those. So what we found is that this common understanding that recycling was different from community to community, even from MRF to MRF, was not accurate, and that we had much more in common than we thought. That led us to create this one basic sign that has 4 categories of recyclables and 9 items that can be recycled. And those 4 categories are that we can recycle some plastic, just some plastic, we can recycle metal, we can recycle glass, and we can recycle paper. The 9 items are plastic bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars. And if it isn't one of those things and it's plastic, then it needs to go in the trash can. Metal cans, glass bottles and jars, and then paper and cardboard. Those are the 9 items that can reliably be recycled, not only across North Carolina, but nationwide and really in most of the world right now. Once we had our accepted materials lists and could educate about the things that were reliably recyclable, we developed a handout called Get Cart Smart. And this one kind of drills down a little bit more and talks specifically about the fact that the reason that certain things can only be recycled and other ones cannot is based on their shape and size, that the machines and the technology recognize the shape and size of certain items. So that's one big way to know what is recyclable and what isn't. The machines know plastic bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars, metal cans, glass bottles and jars. They understand paper, cartons, and cardboard. But some of this other teeny tiny stuff or really big stuff or things that are a different shape than the shapes that I just mentioned are not things that our sorting system can handle. We also, on this handout, have the things that just are straight up trash. They got to go to the landfill. Things like aerosol cans and ceramic items, pumps and tubes, which are made out of multiple materials, so not recyclable. Tanglers, things that get caught in the gears of the recycling facility, of course, styrofoam, and one that a lot of people don't know, receipts. Receipts are generally lined with layers and chemicals that can't be remanufactured or recycled into anything. This here is also on the Get Cart Smart handouts. These are the non-curbside recyclables. So a lot of folks are like, what I thought plastic bags could be recycled. Well, the can at the front of your grocery store, but if you put them in your curbside bin, they tangle up in the gears and they actually shut down the machines for about 30 minutes every 3 hours in almost every material recovery facility across the nation. So we don't want to see those plastic bags in there. When I was talking about the post that really got to a big audience on our campaign when we launched. That post was the no bag post. This was real big news to a lot of people. So yeah, we don't want to see those in the curbside, but we can collect them in other ways. Same things with things like textiles, hazardous waste, electronics, appliances, medical waste. And then we like to see food waste, paper towels, and napkins going into your backyard compost pile if you've got that, or your curbside compost, which some people are starting to have. And then we also include this little bit about some confusing items, things that we say yes and no to in the recycling industry, which is, you know, a real troublesome thing for a lot of the public. We like to see caps screwed on. So if it screws on, leave it with its container. If it pops off, if it's a lid, we want to see that go in the trash, because the likelihood is it'll get separated from its container and transport. We like clean pizza boxes, but dirty ones need to be composted or put in the trash. We like egg cartons that are made out of paper, but we don't like the ones that are styrofoam and plastic, because those are, again, things that are not recyclable. Clean aluminum foil is fine if you've got it, and if it's not, if it's dirty, then it's got to go in the trash. From the handouts that we made, we also created social media toolkits. So from the accepted materials list, the Get Cart Smart that I just went over, our Know Your Nose series, which we'll talk about a little bit, and Recycling Revealed. And these are some of the posts that we put out there on our page. So we went over the big things that we don't want to see, which is bagged recyclables, food waste in the recycling. We don't want to see medical waste, because that's tough on our workers, right? Plastic wrap and plastic bags, which we've already talked about, paper towels and tissue, big contaminant. My mother-in-law is chief among the people who is wish cycling that. She saw these posts, and I knew that we had won because she sent me a thumbs up and then a private message saying she had no idea and was glad to know this. For Recycling Revealed series, we did some things, popular questions we get, like, should I clean it? Yes. Why? Because it's kind of crummy for the workers to have to deal with those things that are dirty, and it also raises the value of the recyclable if it's a little cleaner going in. Plastic codes, we've already talked a little bit about, but that plastic code is not a symbol that actually means the item is recyclable. We know something's recyclable if it's a plastic bottle, tub, jug, or jar, but even if it's got the numbers on it and that recycling symbol, that doesn't mean anything except for it's indicating the kind of plastic that is. And that was something that evolved in the industry, so that I could call up somebody in China back then and say, hey, I got a bale of number 2s, are you buying? And what's your price? This is not something that was supposed to become an international symbol for all things recyclable. So we need to know what the things are, those 9 items, instead of relying on the symbol on things, because it doesn't always tell us what we need to know. Flattened things are not great for the recycling. They are perceived as paper by the machines. The machines recognize flat stuff as paper or cardboard. So if we flatten our cans, that does not do anything except for get caught in a paper bale, and we don't want to see that, because that reduces the value of that bale. I have done trainings before. I know not to lead with this image, because if I do, I'm stuck talking to people for the next 90 minutes just about cups. Cups are not recyclable at this point in time for a lot of reasons. They're usually pretty flimsy, they splinter in the recycling, they're usually contaminated with liquid or the leftover coffee that you had, the straws, the lids, none of that is recyclable. So if you've got a disposable cup, you need to pop it in the trash. And these are some social media toolkits that we came up with more recently since the campaign. One is the Do Your Part series that we did for COVID-19 specific items that had started popping up in the waste stream, things like masks and gloves. Also, we started seeing a whole lot more plastic packaging for all that toilet paper once we got a hold of it. And a lot more cardboards. This whole series is about what to do with those items. We also did a little push around compost this spring. Backyard composting and interest in it went through the roof as more people were staying at home. We're continuing to see a surge in interest in that. So we're doing some solid education on what can and can't be composted in your backyard pile. We also created these training handouts for anyone. And so I'm going over all this stuff, not just because I like talking about it, but also so that you guys have these things available to you, and we'll go over where to find them on our website too. We also produced urgent information handouts for press, elected officials, and the general public. And so if your community is going through some challenges around recycling, you might find these real helpful, and you can share them with your staff. You can share them with your elected officials at any meetings that might be happening where folks are making some decisions about recycling. We have a great fact sheet that summarizes all the wonderful things about recycling in North Carolina, including how many jobs that is created in our economy. It also summarizes some of the things I talked about today with what happened with China. We've got Defending Recycling, which is a talking points handout. So it kind of tells you some things you might hear an elected official say, like, you know, no one in our community cares about recycling, or we don't have the money to pay for this. And then it gives you some ways to approach that conversation a little bit differently with some real facts and information. And then Saving Recycling is a document that we came up with this summer through some webinars we were asked to give to help local governments and communities decide how to switch up their programs to save a little bit of money, but not cut their programs. Folks sometimes are quick to say, we're just going to get rid of it, and we can't really do that. Recycling has to be part of any good municipal solid waste strategy. In this day and age, with this many people producing this much waste, based on the charts that Mike showed you, we don't have the option to not even think about doing that at this point. We still have to pay for it, whether it's going to the recycling facility or the landfill. And so this handout really addresses all that and suggests things like, instead of picking up weekly, why not pick up every 2 weeks? And bring folks some extra carts if they need them. So there are these small changes that can be made in a stepwise fashion to keep recycling up and going in your local community. We also have bin signage and decals that we developed as a result of this campaign. A lot of folks have been asking us for these. We can customize them for you for your particular waste stream as well. So we have these stock images and these basic templates that are pretty handy for most communities. A lot of them can just go with the basics that we've got, but if you need some tweaks to them, do let us know. These can be real helpful for your in-house systems for recycling collection. And this is where you can find our stuff. So if you go to recyclemorenc.org, everything will be right there for you to access. All the handouts, all the information about what can and can't be recycled, the link to that MRF shed map that I shared with you earlier, everything is there, including all those handouts for your local government officials if you need them for your community. And so this is just a little summary of, what now? What are we going to see next in the recycling industry and what's coming down the pike? A lot of focus on extended producer responsibility. So although the consumer, the person who's generating the trash and the recycling, needs to think about and know not to recycle and what to put where, also there's a lot of focus on maybe we shouldn't be making so much of this stuff at the source. So really looking at industry to start to think about more responsible packaging. Domestic markets, as Mike was going over, are thriving right now. We have to create them. The option to send stuff overseas, of course, is gone, and that's not a bad correction. That's a real good one because it means more industry, more jobs, and that we're being responsible for our own recycling here in our own country. That's wonderful news, actually. And we're lucky in the Southeast to be as supported as we are with that. We're going to definitely see an uptick in focus on recycled content. That's a wonderful thing that's coming back into the public consciousness and within industry consciousness too, purchasing practices and things like that. Unified messaging. So clearly this campaign was a success. In fact, I'm going to be speaking to the Northeast Recycling Coalition in the next couple of weeks. Georgia is going to be picking this campaign up pretty shortly. It sounds like I just spoke with them. We've had a lot of interest from across the country. And that's not just because of us, it's because of a need, right? We made this campaign hoping that it would get some traction. That is happening because we have to have messaging that the public can understand. We're going to see definitely an uptick in a focus on food waste and composting, not just backyard, but also curbside. And that's already happening here in North Carolina. Several communities are looking at curbside compost programs. Waste reduction goals, plans, bans are going to be a big focus, and a lot more resident and citizen awareness and activism. I was just on a panel last night for Towards Zero Waste here in the central part of the state. Don't Waste Durham has gotten a lot of traction in that area. A lot is happening with the zero wasters, the resident activists starting to get real active in their local government decision-making process. So what can you do? Really look at your on-site bin placement and getting a solid system. Bins that move are usually troublesome. If they have a place to be and can be designated, color-coded, if they're going to be for trash, black or gray. Blue should be recycling. If you're going to do compost, that's generally green or brown. And then usually those hard to recycle items go in a red container. That's what most folks tend to do. You need good signage with them, like the signs that I showed you earlier that are very image heavy, less words. Sometimes I go into facilities, I see all words on a sign. No one reads anymore. Seeing an image, it really gives people an idea of what I need to put in that bin. Other things you can do, train via webinars or in person, or have folks come in and help with those trainings. You can share resources with your people via the social media and also through emails. Consider your hard to recycles, consider compost, consider packaging. Waste reduction goals and plans, of course, we like to see that. More employee engagement around this stuff. More and more, your average American finds these things to be important American values. That's what we've seen over the last 20 years. A lot of people think of this stuff as being very important to their daily life, and the more that we can do to engage employees around that, the better. And if your community needs recycling support, definitely look into that and do let us know, because we can help with that. We can certainly help with that community recycling support, helping your local government, helping your resident activists get the information they need to make good decisions. In-house for y'all within industry, we can certainly help with bin systems, with the signage aspect, presentations that kind of drill down into what is and isn't recycling and how to do it right. We're happy to support that. We do know a little bit about employee engagement and can help consult on that level too. Certainly hard to recycle solutions. You were listening to Mike earlier, and he knows quite a bit. I know you guys have a full team that also gets all that through WRP and all sorts of other ways, and I'm available as well. Certainly around food waste and compost, we have a full-time staff member at Deeks now who can assist with that. And I'm a hardcore supporter of that as well, coming out of Boulder, where we did one of the first curbside compost programs, and where I helped a lot of industry get up to speed on how to do that in-house. And if you have any other big dreams around recycling, waste diversion, hard to recycle solutions, any of this stuff, please get in contact, let us know, and we're here to help you with whatever you might dream up next. This is our contact information for both myself and Mike, and also where you can find our posts on Facebook, on Recycle More North Carolina, and then also on the Deeks website, recyclenc.org. And I'll hand it back because I think we're gonna potentially take some questions. Yeah.
Okay, thanks Mel and Mike, both wonderful presentations. I learned a lot and I even work with you guys, so that's great. We have a few questions for those of you who might have come up with some ideas for questions along the way. There is a question box in your control panel for GoToWebinar. Feel free to type those in and we'll take as many as we can. We have a few to get started with though while the rest of you are typing. So a couple of the questions are, what is the best option for recycling glass when you have a county that no longer takes it?
Mike, do you want to take this one? You've been helping a lot of communities get that set up. I certainly can, but I know you're the expert on the ground.
Yeah, so some counties have dropped it. Probably the best thing, it really depends on where you are. If you can get in touch with me, I'll be happy to kind of look at some solutions for your area.
Great, great. We'll make sure that we get in contact with these folks as well. Someone also apparently is a brewer, and they are interested in getting involved in your brewery waste consolidation program. So they're curious about if they can be involved, and then what items they are actually recycling.
Okay, so as far as what they're recycling, it's the polypropylene bags from grain, the Mylar bags that the hops came in, the plastic shrink wrap, cardboard. I believe those were the primary items. I've got there's one pocket that is in the state that is just about to launch. I've got other pockets in different parts of the state that we're trying to get up and running. So yeah, if that person can get in touch with me, if there's anybody else that is currently working in their area, I will definitely hook them up with contacts. But yeah, I definitely want to talk to the brewer to find out more.
Great. We will make sure you two are connected.
Excellent.
Yeah. I don't know if Tom is on and can answer this, or if you two can, but a specific question for Waste Trader. The Waste Trader listing has price desired for the material, but doesn't specify if you're willing to pay for transportation or recycling. So there's no easy way to show that we're willing to pay for the material to be recycled. So I think that's just a note on its capabilities.
Definitely. One thing you can try and do is put that in the description of the product. But no, I definitely think that's a great idea of something to add.
Okay. And we'll forward that comment to you as a reminder.
Okay, great.
Perfect. All right.
You know, I wouldn't mind circling back to the glass question.
Sure.
You know, I think what they were asking in a general way, here's what we can say about glass. Communities are looking at what to do with it. Most are keeping it. Even the communities across the state who have talked about letting it go have had to reverse that decision a couple of times because the public outcry has been so great. Glass is something that folks know is infinitely recyclable. We have glass processing here in the state, a wonderful company that does that. And so, you know, glass is not something that folks are going to let go of in a community. So if your community is thinking about removing it, there are other things that can be done. In the single stream, it can be heavy, and during these times when people are looking at reducing cost of the recycling program, sometimes that's the first thing that folks say, well, let's just take that out. Let's just not do that anymore. And that's just not really something that's reasonable from the public's perspective. And it's not that reasonable from the recycling angle either. It's much smarter to be recycling glass even than plastic because it does have that infinite recyclability. So there are solutions like taking them to a drop-off site. All of that is evolving. It's pretty, and I would say that the amount of communities that are thinking about removing glass is much smaller than those who are keeping it in. So just a little kind of background information on all that.
Wonderful.
Hey, Mike and Mel, this is Marsha.
Yeah.
The person noted they were in Edgecombe County, so I don't know if you have any insight about what's going on in Edgecombe.
Yes. We've actually been trying to work with a solution for them, especially because it's so close to the main spot in North Carolina where the glass is processed in Wilson, North Carolina. So yeah, I definitely would like to talk with you on one-on-one on that.
Sounds good. All right, another question for you, and I think, Mel, this one goes to something you mentioned in your presentation, and this is, when focusing on the container type rather than the recycling symbol for what to recycle, is that because the container type is typically made from certain types of plastic that are known to be recyclable, and those shapes also work with the sorting machines?
Yes, that is exactly right. And I hope that you learned a little bit of that from what we just talked about. So yes, that's it. I mean, you know, kind of on a peeling back even further, like what makes something recyclable, right? It is an interesting question. And it's basically what has a market and what is their sorting technology for. Those are the two things. So if there's a buyer, if then we can recycle it. And in general, the things that bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars are made out of material that there's a buyer for, right? And we have technology that recognizes how to sort those things out. A lot of these other plastics that have come out in the last 5 to 10 years are what we call low-grade plastics. They're very flexible. They do not, even if you try to collect them, because they're so, I don't know, you know those plastic bottles, the water bottles that, like, if you touch it or just look at it, it kind of gives, it bends. Those things cannot come back into another piece of plastic very well. They're made out of very low grade plastic. So, and yogurt cups is another great example. Anything single serving, anything single use is generally made out of a light-weighted, low-grade plastic that does not have any recyclability. So, you know, those are some of the things to kind of think about. But the reason, like, bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars are also easy for the machines to sort is because they retain their form. And the fact that they retain their form means that we can bring them back for another life, right? They're made out of a higher grade plastic. So that's, you know, a deeper dive answer. When we're talking to the general public, though, we just talk about recognizing those shapes, the plastic bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars, because we know that those are things that can be recycled well, both by the machines and they have a good market.
Perfect. We did have a comment from our section chief over the recycling section, and she says that they are definitely currently working on the waste trader tool and will consider that comment from before when they are redeveloping it. So that's good news for you guys. And I have one more question at the moment, so if anybody else has any questions, feel free to get them typed in. But this one is, has the automation at the MRF level helped out in North Carolina yet? I've read about AI robotics to help with purity at separation.
I mean, technology, this is the broadest answer. Yes, the technology improvements are wonderful. I think when we get a question like this, though, sometimes folks are like, when they say, is that going to help out? What folks mean is, can we recycle more things, right? And that's not really what the technology is designed for, because we're also dependent on these markets. Like I said, the technology supports what has a value, right? And so the technology is also not designed necessarily our MRFs are not set up to separate out trash from recycling. That's not what they're there to do. The material recovery facility is set up to separate recyclables into piles, not to get the junk out of there, right? And so I think a lot of folks, when they think about recycling, because we haven't done a great job of talking about this as a community and with the public, they think that we should be able to just put a bunch of stuff in the bin, and then it should be able to go to some sort of facility that takes the trash out and then puts the recyclables into the right piles. And that's just not a very reasonable assumption on our parts, especially if you were to ever go and tour one of those facilities. You would see how the line is, the people, the technology. It's pretty awesome, and it's pretty uniform. Most MRFs have the same technology at this point. It can separate items that are similar, like materials. So it pulls out the cardboard, it pulls out the paper, then it separates the different kinds of plastics into the right things. And that happens with an optical sorter that recognizes the shape and the density of items. So the technology is pretty good, and in North Carolina, it's real good, and there's grants and all sorts of support to keep the technology evolving. But it doesn't mean when we say that, that the technology is getting better, and when we say that the technology in North Carolina is strong, that doesn't mean that we're going to be able to necessarily recycle other items, because there's not a market for those items.
And I'll add to that, I did get to see the first MRF robot in North Carolina recently, and it is super cool if you're a tech geek. But I mean, it was basically, it was a box, there was an arm inside that was picking the items. And the thing they're being put in place for is not to sort more trash, as Mel was saying, but to make it more efficient, to make the lines where you can run it, the conveyor belt, basically, you can run the conveyor belt quicker. And instead of a human picking up the item, the computer can recognize it quicker and is lightning fast and picking up the item. So yeah, it's not meant to be a trash sorting advantage. It's meant to be a time and labor advantage.
And I'll jump in with one more thing. Some people sometimes get nervous and think that the robots and the improved technology are going to put people out of jobs, and that has not been the experience. That's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing is that you know, the need for people to operate the facility remains the same. We still have to have folks that can move the bales around with the forklifts. And we find ways within the facilities to move the people into other better jobs than sorting on the line when we replace with a robot, right? So my experience too, I just like to tell people that sometimes get anxious about the new technology is, you know, the new technology is good, and it also improves the workplace and the jobs that we're giving people.
Perfect. Well, that was the last question that we had. Thank you both very much. Very, very interesting stuff. We have about 4 minutes before our next presentation is set to start. And as we mentioned yesterday, we want to give folks that are coming in and out of our sessions some time to do that. So let's take a quick 3-minute break and then come back here at 10:30, and we'll hear from Bill Steinmetz with NIEHS at that point.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you.
All right, folks, it's about 10:31. Dawn, are you ready?
I sure am, Marcia.
Okay.
And hello, everyone. I'm Don Burke of the Environmental Stewardship Initiative. It's my pleasure to introduce, well, let me get my camera up as well, but to introduce our next speaker at the 2020 ESI Virtual Conference Day 2, Mr. Bill Steinmetz. Bill serves as the Environmental Management System Coordinator at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences in Research Triangle Park. He splits his time between managing environmental permits and collaborating with various teams to reduce environmental impacts from NIEHS campus activities. Bill has nearly 30 years of experience in the environmental field, with 19 of those years at the NIEHS. His prior employment included performing environmental inspections and conducting air monitoring studies with both Kentucky and North Carolina state governments. Bill has an MS degree in environmental planning as well. And Bill, if you're ready, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Don. And good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me clearly at this time.
We can hear you fine, Bill, and we see your presentation.
Excellent. So I'm going to talk about our printer policy and our paper reduction efforts, which have been going on now for about the past 5 to 7 years. First, I want to talk a little bit about the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. Our mission is to discover how the environment affects people in order to promote healthier lives. We are part of the National Institutes of Health, which is in a way our corporate office, headquarters, located in Bethesda, Maryland. We have two primary types of research: intramural, which is on-campus research performed in our labs by federal government scientists and contractors. And our research labs are typical of what you would see on a college campus. Then we also have what's known as extramural. Those are grant-funded programs funding laboratory research and studies at universities and other facilities across the nation. Our priority research areas, as you can see, are autism, cancer, nanomaterials, metals toxicity, pesticides, Superfund, as well as coronavirus. And we are not a production facility. Our output is actually knowledge. Some history. We've been in RTP since 1966. We moved to our current campus in the early 80s. Features, I mentioned we have research labs, admin and office space, cafeteria. We have a central utility plant with boilers and chillers that heats and cools both our side of the campus as well as the EPA side of the campus. It's about 500 acres of federal government property out here. Around 385 belong to NIEHS. And we have roughly 1,300 employees. Around a third of those are contractors. So here's an overview. I'm going to talk about how the policy was developed, how we measure progress, our accomplishments after 5 years of having a printer policy, and what we want to do next. So first off, we're a federal facility, part of the executive branch of the United States government. So when the president or the White House issues an executive order, that covers what we do here at NIEHS. And there's been a series of environmental executive orders since 1998. Every administration has had one or more of these environmental executive orders, and they're focused on energy conservation and sustainability. In particular, the 1998 executive order required us to use 30% post-consumer recycled content paper. So we did that, and we did that for years. We checked the box every year when we report up to NIH Bethesda. Well, one year, management came around and said, hey, why can't we use 100% recycled content paper? And we said, well, because we're only required to use 30%. That wasn't the correct answer. So I said, well, check into it and see if this is something we can do. So we talked with our computer support personnel, and the first thing they said is that the paper would curl. This is the South. There's going to be a lot of printer jams. It's not going to work. So we got a hold of some 100% recycled content paper, and we had the computer folks run a couple of tests, covert tests, and they discovered that the 100% recycled content paper did not jam. It worked great. Nobody noticed the change. And so we began using the 100% recycled content paper in 2013. So we were all standing around giving each other high fives and about to pop some corks when management came back and said, that paper costs a lot of money. Now you need to reassemble a team, find out how we could use less paper. So we had 100% recycled content paper, but we're still using the same amount of paper, and now it costs So we looked at a lot of data and decided that we needed an overarching printer policy to reduce the amount of paper that we use here at the NIEHS. So we had to decide what data to use. And this is important. We wanted to be able to track progress and be really close to what's actually happening. And we knew that we might have to use some surrogate data, which we did. And we also wanted to avoid changing the types of data and the units of measure once we started. So we thought about this quite a bit because we didn't want to get a year or two down the road and then decide, well, we don't like those units or that type of data, and then have to go back and rebuild the tracking. So we used the 8.5 by 11 printer copier paper as the benchmark for all types of paper. And this is our surrogate paper type. Again, it is the majority of the paper that we use here, or at least in 2014. So the pros, it's a standard size, consistent high usage. Cons, we weren't counting the 8.5 by 14, some of the other larger size paper like posters. We also had to use fiscal year paper purchases as the surrogate for sheets of paper. Since we had nearly 1,100 printers on campus, and some of those were not networked, it would be extremely difficult to get an accurate count. So the pros, this data is easy to obtain. The warehouse tracks paper purchases. And so at the end of the fiscal year, which is coming up now, I could contact the warehouse, say in October, and ask how much paper we purchased, and I'll have a data point for fiscal 20. Now, you can have some outliers created by the purchase cycle. We don't buy paper at the same time every year. So you may also have an end of year purchase that creeps in, and that could become an outlier for your fiscal year data point. So the workaround is you can use a 3-year rolling average. But what's most important is that you have a trend, a multi-year trend. So you're not comparing year to year, you're comparing many years over time to actually see the trend develop. Printer inventory, this is an easy one. All printers are accountable government property. So that property must be tracked in an inventory. Every year a group comes around with a scanner, reads the UPC, and they track the location. So the inventory is really in near real time, because whenever a new printer comes in or a new one leaves for surplus, that is also tracked. So we look at the printer count early in the fiscal year, once a year. Printer cartridge usage. This is printer paper policy. We're also trying to reduce the amount of ink we use. All of our printer cartridges are collected for reuse, recycling. It's really reuse off-site where they're refilled. Collection occurs about every other month. We do count the number of cartridges for the printer policy tracking, but also we calculate the weight. We just use an average. We weighed a certain number of cartridges, came up with an average. That way we actually count those towards our recycling data as well. We use toner cartridges as the surrogate here for printer cartridges. A vast majority of our printers use the toner cartridges. Only a few use the inkjet. And then on top of that, most of the work, most of the print jobs actually use the toner cartridges. So here's our benchmarking for 2014 after we looked at all the data. We found out that on average, each employee was using about 3,700 sheets of paper per year, which we thought was just crazy. Especially our group. That meant some people, or some efforts, some actions, we're using 10,000 sheets per year. Printer population, sky high. That's almost one printer per employee at the time. And then ink cartridges, as you know, those cost a lot of money, and we're using about 950 per year. And something else we evaluated, printer service. We went through all of the computer support tickets and found that there were about 1,100 tickets for printer service. You know, printer not working, printer jammed, need printer removed or printer installed. That also adds up to a whole lot of money for the computer support techs. So with all that data, we moved towards developing policy. So we assembled a team and we drafted some policy language. The team included elements of the EMS team, as well as the warehouse folks, acquisitions, and computer support. We worked over the policy quite well. It came out to be about 2 pages. And we presented it to our management council for review, and they approved it. And then we took it to leadership, and the policy was endorsed by our institute director in October of 2015. So what's in the policy? What are the components? Well, we wanted to develop paperless forms, paperless workflow processes, and e-sig capability. We wanted to reduce the amount of desktop printers, come up with a standardized fleet, move towards centralized printing like it used to be in the old days when there was one printer that serviced an office, or perhaps the printer was in the basement of a building across the street. Default printer setup to duplex, reduce paper and ink consumption, follow Department of Health and Human Services energy management requirements. This just means that the printer's not in use, they're required to sleep. We did discover a couple of printers from the Reagan era that were still in use when we looked at the data in 2014. Those have since been replaced. And another goal was to educate our employees about printing alternatives. There were a few exemptions to the policy. For example, our office, I work for the health and safety branch. We used to have 6 different locations on our campus. And the way our building is set up, the primary building is really a series of 6 interconnected buildings. So with these 6 locations, it was inefficient at the time to not have a printer at the various locations. Also, the printers that are used for publications at the copy center, those were exempt. There could be a specialized functional need. You have a piece of, if you have some analytical equipment that's connected to a printer, it's not networked. Plotters for construction drawings, and then the health unit medical records. At the time, there was a lot of printing of those records and filing. Those were exempted. So we developed the policy, it was approved. I mentioned what was in the policy. Well, then we had to promote it, get the word out. We have online news, we have an online newsletter here, so we were publishing articles a couple times a year about policy. We post the policy on the internal website and then directed people to it through those online newsletter articles. Also had all hands email from the institute director. We consider this something very important because if an all hands email comes out from me, some guy in the basement, there may not be as much readership as if it comes out from the institute director. So we thought that was great buy-in from the top and excellent support. Our director also provides quarterly all hands meetings, at least before the pandemic. And our group would put together a single page PowerPoint slide about the policy for the director to present at her quarterly all hands. And she did this a couple of times over a several year period for us. We also surveyed our office and management personnel, which is probably about 90, one-on-one to to inform them about the printer policy and find out more about how they use their printers. And we still do the printer paper reduction reminders during our laboratory walkthroughs. We have 300 lab spaces on our campus, and we try to visit every lab space once per year as part of our audits and remind people about reducing paper use and eliminating printers that are not needed. Efforts. Well, we networked these multi-function centralized printer scanner copiers. What does that mean? There's several of these throughout our main building. Let's say you have a hard copy document and you want a copy, or someone has a hard copy document, you want a copy of their document. Well, you could just scan it, and the scan goes to your email, and then you have an electronic or digital copy. You don't have to make a paper copy. So we try to make this easy for employees. We provided training so our employees can learn how to use e-signatures, which now with the pandemic going on, that's how I mail things. E-signature, and send the document by email. We moved a variety of actions to electronic format. Performance appraisals, travel authorizations, warehouse receiving. When the warehouse would deliver a package to us, there would be 2 sheets of paper, one for me to sign and give back, and one for me to sign and keep. Now that's all digital. We've also set up conference rooms with projectors for paperless meetings run by laptop, and educated staff on paper and ink saving measures. And here's a couple of reminders what you can do. The biggest one is printing double-sided can reduce paper usage by 50%. All these others reduce by smaller amounts. Also note that the draft quality setting on your printer can reduce ink usage by about 10%. And another very important one is if you review your document electronically before you print, if you have to print, make sure you don't have that last line that carries over to the 3rd page, so to say, and then you have your phone number or your company logo that shows up on that last sheet. You could have squeezed it into just 2 pages. Let's look at the data. So you can see here the Y is the sheets of paper purchased and the X is time. You see a big spike in 2013. We used some end of year money there to make our first purchase of the 100% recycled content paper. And as you can see over time, it's been trending downward, and we kind of stabilized for a while, and then some of these electronic document flow actions kicked in for 2018 and 19. So I'm very curious to see where we're going to be for 2020. And like I said, I should know something within a couple of weeks. Also, ream is 500 sheets of paper. And then a box is 10 reams or 5,000 sheets of paper. So that 10,340 reams, multiply that times 500 and you get the sheets. So we've done well with reducing the amount of paper we use here. We haven't done quite as well with the printers. That's a little more challenging, but you can see we went from that 1,066. Now we were a little over 800 last year, and our goal is to get the printer population under 700 by 2024. Now this one's a mystery. This is toner cartridge recycling history. This is the data. You have to let the data speak for itself. It's relatively flat. So you can assume people are printing two-sided. Perhaps there's some error that we don't understand. Or I do work for the government, so it could be a conspiracy. Maybe there's just not as much ink in the toners as there used to be. And this is how it's showing up. So we're going to have to keep looking at this data for several more years and see if a trend actually develops. This one I just wanted to display to show how the money has changed. So you have paper costs on the Y and time on the X. So the left bar or green is the money spent, and then the right bar or brown is sheets of paper. So you can see a change those first couple years, less money per sheet of paper. And then you can see how, especially 2014, that we were spending more money per sheet. Then over time, if you look to more recent years, 18 and 19, it's economics. More people are buying the 100% recycled content paper, so the cost per sheet has come down. Challenges, printer entitlement. A lot of people, I'm sure this happens more than just here. They've got that printer in their office, that's theirs. Don't take it on the printer. So it's hard to get some people to change. You have to keep advertising the benefit. And sometimes what we've done, at least with our group, when people retire, leave, we'll go in and we'll take the printer. And then when someone new is hired and they ask where the printer is, we'll say, well, it's across the hall. A challenge we're hoping to work on next couple of years, cubicle cities. We have a couple of areas in this building where there's a lot of employees, a lot of cubicles, and a lot of printers that we're still trying to reduce. So we'll have to come up with space to have a couple more network printers and work to reduce the number of desktop printers. One pushback we got was confidential print jobs. I'm in acquisitions, or I have to print documents that aren't for other people to see. Well, there is such a thing as secure print, and most modern printers have this, where you can enter a code before you send your print job. Send your print job, and when you get to the printer, it won't be waiting for you in hard copy form, where it could get mixed in with someone else's print job. You just type in your code, and then your print job is released, and you're right there when it's printed. In addition, we did leave the policy slightly open for managerial judgment. So an employee, if they would like a new printer, they have to justify the purchase of that printer, and then the manager is supposed to ask, do you really need that? If they really do, the manager could say, okay, yes, you need a printer, we're going to get you a new one. This is all dependent on job duties to some degree as well. Future direction, well, the policy's 5 years old. We have a new director, and our group here has had some turnover as well, so we want to take a fresh look at the policy. Again, we want to focus on...
Hey, Bill, this is...
Go ahead.
Bill, this is Don. We got about 4 minutes.
Okay. Thanks. So we want to focus on reducing printer population some more, as I showed you in that graphic. We also want to default printers to black and white. The color cartridges are much more expensive, and we don't do many color productions here for general purpose use. We also want to evaluate our paper usage during COVID teleworking. My last bullet here is teleworking without printers should have forced behavioral change that could be carried into the future. Well, it's interesting. If I had given this presentation before the pandemic, maybe there would have been more wow impact to it. But nothing like a pandemic to force you to change your approach to printing, because I'm pretty sure people that are teleworking are not printing as much as they would when in the office. And that's all I have for today. It's discussion about our NIEHS printer policy.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. That was fantastic. We did get a comment from our own staff that it's something DEQ definitely needs to implement. And also want to give a shout out from Dick Sloan. He wanted to say hi.
Okay, say hello to Dick Sloan. Yes, he is my coworker out here for many years.
Great. There are, from what I can see, there are no questions at this time.
Hi, Don. We have one question that came in.
Okay, great, Lisa.
Lisa Shanklin. I have a question about particulates and VOC data from printers.
Yes,
That was the question.
that was the question. Yes, we are aware that there are some particulates that can come off of printers when they are, especially when they are warming up. We don't have any measurement data of that type, but yes, we are aware of that.
Thank you.
We actually had mentioned that when we were developing the policy as a concern that's out there when you are printing. You print less, you could improve your indoor air quality to some degree.
And Don, that's all I see.
Okay, fantastic. Bill, thank you so much again. And I believe that's it, unless there are any other questions that have come in. I believe we're right on time to move to our next presenter, or about a minute away.
Okay, thank you.
Scott, would you like to take that introduction?
Sounds good. Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Bill.
Next up, we have Elizabeth Tutino. Elizabeth is an environmental engineer with Cree Wolfspeed. She has been with Cree Wolfspeed for 4 years and focuses on air permitting and compliance, as well as corporate sustainability efforts. Elizabeth has a BS in environmental engineering and a master's in engineering management. Cree Wolfspeed has been an ESI member since 2018 and is looking forward to telling you about their on-site EV charging stations. And Elizabeth, oh, looks like you've got control there. Thank you for the folks behind the scenes. Take it away.
Okay. So as Scott said, I'm Elizabeth. I'm an environmental engineer at Cree Wolfspeed, and I am based at our Durham, North Carolina headquarters. And today I'm going to talk to you about electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging and how that relates to Cree Wolfspeed products and also the charging stations that we have on our sites in North Carolina. So a little bit about who Cree Wolfspeed is. You may have heard Cree before. We started out of NC State in 1987. And on the LED side, this is one of the types of products that we make. You may have also be thinking, yeah, I've seen Cree's name when I go into Home Depot and there's a light bulb there that I can purchase. But actually, we sold our lighting division in early 2019. So that includes anything like a lighting fixture or a bulb. We no longer make those items, even though it still says Cree on it, which is a little confusing. But we still make the individual LEDs, the small components that go into applications such as high power lighting or specialty lighting, billboards and video screens. And we're also in different automotive applications like headlights and dashboards. And on the Wolfspeed side, this is more of where our company is shifting its strategic focus. Wolfspeed has to do with our power and radio frequency products. So on the radio frequency product side, that deals with communications infrastructure and the switch to 5G. Our radio frequency products are also in different kind of military applications like radar, aerospace, and defense. On the power side, which is more relevant to this presentation today, has to do with applications like electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging, renewable energy, just as a few examples. So this is really where we're going to be putting our more strategic focus, which I'll get into in a little bit. Okay, so we have locations all over the world, but we have 2 manufacturing locations in the Durham Research Triangle Park area, and Durham, North Carolina is our headquarters, and that's where I'm located. So where have you maybe seen us? On the LED side, In Raleigh, there's the Shimmer Wall. Our LEDs are in there. Our LEDs are also in Times Square and at the PNC Arena on the big sign that's there. We've also, to focus more on our power products and electric vehicles, we've sponsored EV charging stations at PNC Arena, and we've also developed some partnerships with different automotive manufacturers to place our products into electric vehicles. So to put that into perspective, how much the automotive industry is transitioning over to electric vehicles, the automotive industry is investing $350 billion into the EV market. And we're really excited for that because our products are really placed to help move that industry forward. So really what makes our products special in a way, the traditional kind of base material for how the products are made is originally silicon, but our products and our claim to fame is silicon carbide, and we make a lot of silicon carbide in the world. And the reason why silicon carbide is better than silicon is a lot of different reasons. It's cooler, faster, lighter, smaller, tougher, greener. So basically there's, for the same amount of, I guess, output or what you're looking for, you need less silicon carbide products. They're lighter. So in electric vehicles, that means you can have a smaller battery, which reduces the weight of the battery in the vehicle. It allows you to go farther versus using silicon. And then on the EV charging side, there's less power loss or electricity loss, which I'll talk about in a second. But that means that less energy loss, the charging times are faster. And really, we're excited to move to this more strategic focus of focusing on electric vehicles. And we made an announcement, I guess early 2019, that we were going to increase our silicon carbide wafer fabrication capacity by 30 times. And that includes building a new facility that will help drive and meet that demand actually in New York. And so as we're building that new facility in New York, we're going to be expanding certain parts of our process in the Durham site too. So we're excited for the expansion to be able to meet the EV demand. Okay, so I just talked about EVs and charging, but really it gets a little bit confusing. What needs to come first? Is it that car manufacturers have to have more models of electric vehicles for people to adopt them, or does there need to just be more electric vehicle charging stations available? So the answer to that is actually in a 2018 Volvo survey, the answer really was that there needs to be more charging stations, and that was kind of the factor that was forcing people to not buy electric vehicles, because some of the obstacles that people find when they want to make that transition to an electric vehicle is they're afraid of running out of power, which is referred to as range anxiety. Basically, they want to be able to drive from Raleigh to Western North Carolina and not have to worry about where am I going to find a charging station, or am I going to run out of charge? And then that also ties into just the limited availability of charging stations, which hopefully will change in the future. So there are really two main types of chargers, AC and DC chargers. So on the AC side, this is more of the slow charging kind of charger. And the way that this works is electricity comes out from the charger, it goes into the vehicle on what's called an onboard charger. And so the conversion from AC to DC happens inside the car. And then that gets converted into the battery. And on the DC charging side, that conversion happens off board. So that happens away from the car. The electricity that comes from the charger is already in the right form and it goes directly into the battery. So this means that the charging can just happen faster. You don't have to have this separate onboard charging piece to get you the charge that you need. And breaking that down even further, there are different types of chargers within that. So there's level 1 charging, which would be like a charger that you had in your house, but this can be pretty slow. The level 2 charger, which is what we have on our site for employees, it's a little bit of a higher output, but it's still technically considered an AC, not fast charger. And then you go down to the DC fast chargers, which will give you a lot more range in a smaller amount of time. So in our group, we have an employee who uses our EV charging stations on site, and he told me that pretty much having a charger in your house is somewhat useless. He said for him, it takes about 10 hours to get 40 miles of charge. So if you think about that, that's really not that much for a lot of time that it's sitting there charging. On the level 2 charger, which is what we have on site, he said he uses that one maybe twice a week for 3 hours at a time, and he's able to charge his car pretty well. So that just gives you an idea of the different kind of charging and how long each one takes. So what should I install, an AC or a DC charger at my facility? So the AC chargers, that's the level 1 or 2, they potentially fit with the majority of vehicle models, which I'll talk about in a second. They do have slower charging times, but they may be outdated in the near future as newer models of cars that are more compatible with the fast charger come online. The DC chargers are fast chargers. They may not be able to fit all vehicle models, especially older models, but they do have the faster charging times. They help people reduce that range anxiety issue, and really to move forward and to have this widespread electric vehicle adoption across the world, fast chargers are the future. And it's estimated that 8 to 10 million fast chargers are needed by 2023 to be able to move electric vehicles forward. So a little bit about our charging stations on site. We installed ours in 2018. We have 5 chargers. Each charger has 2 ports. So total, we can allow the charging of 10 cars at a time. We have them at our Durham headquarters and our other manufacturing site in RTP, which is right down the road. We decided to go with the level 2 chargers. At the time when we did a scan of the different cars that people currently have, electric vehicles that people currently have, we realized that, okay, there's a mix of newer and older models, so this would be the one that would fit everybody. We also decided to locate our chargers at a place that was really centrally located, and we put ours at the Visitor Career Center, which is also our gym and cafeteria. It's really just centrally located, and it doesn't make it seem like we're catering to certain employees and not others. It's really for everybody to use, so that's why we put it in a centrally located place. And our charging stations are also free of charge to all employees, so they don't have to pay anything. So referring more to charging money, prior to 2019, only electric utilities could charge money for electricity. So there were a couple of exceptions, but really anyone else who's selling electricity other than a utility is illegal. So that meant prior to 2019, all electric vehicle charging stations were free. There was a new law introduced in 2019 that now allows owners of publicly available EV charging stations to actually charge money for people to use the stations. So the charging of money is not required by law, but it's available as an option. And really this helps give people more of an incentive to add more EV charging stations around. So even though we can charge money for them, we decided that we're still going to be providing our charging stations free of charge to employees. And you may have seen a lot of different companies out there. These are just a few that I put as an example, but these are different providers of the EV charging stations. Our company uses ChargePoint. And we found that they were one of the bigger companies. Their user interface is really just user-friendly and easy, and their customer service is known to be pretty good. So that's why we went with them. And just to give you a little bit of information about how it works, there's a ChargePoint app. That app will give you a map of all of the different charging stations around the country, the world, I guess. And then it also tells you how much you charge your car. And then the way that it works at our site is every employee who has an electric vehicle that uses the charging station gets a key fob. And then they go up to the charging station, they scan the key fob, and then that automatically lets them charge their car. So there are a couple different ways you can use your phone or the key fob, but that's how we do it here. And on the more internal facing view of ChargePoint, there's a lot of data that is tracked by the charging station. So it'll tell you how often the stations are used, which ones are in use, or which ones are full or busy, how long people are charging, how many drivers we have, how much electricity is being used. And kind of a cool fact that they have at the bottom of the screen here is over the lifetime of our chargers, here's how much greenhouse gas emissions we've avoided by installing this charger versus a gasoline car. So I thought that was pretty cool. Some of the challenges that we've faced, we really haven't faced too many. We find that it's been a pretty positive experience. The way that it works for us is we limit all employees to 3 hours of charging, and that's just so we don't have people sitting there too long. It gives everybody a chance to charge their car. Once the 3 hours is over, they get a little notification on their ChargePoint app, and they have 30 minutes to move their car. And we've just had a couple of instances where people haven't moved their car on time. So it's just caused issues for other people who want to use the charging station. But really, that's the main issue we found. Otherwise, it's been positive. So what are the many different things I should consider when choosing an EV charging station? It really helps to look at the current infrastructure at your facility. I think something that was helpful for us when we installed our EVs, I did say it was centrally located, which is super helpful, but it was also located in an area that was easy to access a breaker. So that's helpful to know too, like how much electrical wiring do you need, or things like that. Also consider what the individual needs are of your business. Are you going to limit it to just employees? Are you going to allow visitors? Are you going to allow anybody in the state of North Carolina to use them? Do you have other on-site vehicles, like maybe other electric vehicles that are used for transporting goods? Will you allow those to be used? So it really just depends on what you want to use them for. I would also suggest either surveying or just talking to some people who own electric vehicles currently and trying to figure out what they want out of a charger. And do they want it as fast a charge as possible? Are they using the charging stations at work as their main source of charging, or do they mostly charge at home? And then also trying to figure out how long is appropriate to limit the charging per person so that everybody gets a chance. Another thing to consider is budget. The fast chargers are probably a little more expensive, but more preferred. And really, they're the ones that are going to be driving the EV adoption forward. But something that you can consider is you could charge money for the use of your fast chargers. And if you have a fast charger versus a regular AC charger, you could potentially charge a little bit more money. Another option, I found this on Brightfield's website, which I believe they're out of Asheville. They have a solar powered EV charging station. So that way you can completely offset the use of extra electricity by going solar. A couple of resources if you want to learn more. Wolfspeed has a knowledge center that has different articles about electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging. There's different websites out there to find EV charging station locations, but I found that PlugShare was pretty helpful. There's a EPA website that can tell you more about individual vehicles, which will give you more information about what the range is of different types of vehicles and the potential charge times. To learn more about electric vehicle charging in vehicles in North Carolina, you can visit the Plug-in NC website. Another thing that might be helpful for you is companies can actually make a public commitment to electric vehicle adoption in their fleet, in their employee base, and even installing charging stations through the EV 100 program, which is part of the climate group. So yeah, just more resources if you're curious to learn more about it. And with that, I'm done and open to questions.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. That was a lot of excellent information, and hopefully that sparked some questions. Ron, did we have any coming through?
Hi, this is Ron. Currently, I do not see any questions in the queue. There is one now. Hang on just a second. They're popping up. The first one, is it true that Amazon trucks are all electric?
Ooh, I don't know the answer to that. I would have to go look. I would say maybe a good source to find that information is look at their sustainability website, but I'm not too sure. Sorry about that.
Sure, no problem. Thanks. The next one is, what is the approximate cost to install a charging station?
Yeah, so I asked the group that really was more involved in the implementation of this, and they said they couldn't really give me a specific cost because there are so many combinations of chargers. It really depends on where you're locating it, like how far is it from an electricity source, how many chargers are you adding? So they told me that really the best way to go about finding the cost is to reach out to a company like ChargePoint to figure out what the estimated cost might be, because every facility is different. So I don't really have a specific cost in mind.
Okay, thanks. You did mention in your presentation that you have some 3-hour blocks of time for charging. So we have a question somewhat related to that. Can the charging stations be programmed to block users who repeatedly exceed their 3-hour limit?
I'm sure there is. I don't think that's the way we did it. I think we just really monitored it and sent out emails and said, hey, this is starting to become a problem. You need to move your car. But I bet there is a way to do it. I know that we didn't take that route, but I'm sure there is a way to do that.
Okay, great. And one additional one, solar charge points. I would expect that this would not be too efficient compared to AC plugs. Do you have thoughts on that?
I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it really depends to, again, going back to what kind of infrastructure do you have in place. But in terms of the solar chargers, I'm not so sure.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, thank you, Elizabeth. I don't have any additional questions that I see in the queue at this point.
Actually, I had one. So those who are working on their ISO 14001, ISO 50001 systems, can you talk a little bit about how this could be incorporated, this project specifically could be incorporated into an EMS or an ENMS?
Let me think about that. I guess from an environmental management system perspective, it's definitely related to kind of that employee outreach piece. I'm sorry, I'm not that familiar with ISO as much. I mean, you could, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not that familiar with ISO.
That's all right.
And
That's all right.
I don't know an energy management system really either.
That's okay. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for the presentation, and definitely amped up a lot of people for questions there at the end. There's your contact information for those who want to reach out to you for other questions that may come up. Looks like
if there was a question that came up and I wasn't able to answer it, just send it to me again and I can try and forward it to somebody who may know. If that's helpful.
great. All right. Looks like Marcia's going to jump in here and tell us what's coming up next.
Yep. So folks, Elizabeth, thank you again, and thank you to everyone that presented this morning. That was great information. It really highlights how ESI is a platform for us to share information between members and a regulated community and DEECs and DEQ. So thank you, everyone. We won't have any programming this afternoon. Staff is going to be participating in an EPA and National Pollution Prevention Roundtable training for our EPA grant that helps support the program. But we'll be back tomorrow morning. And I believe you guys are seeing the agenda for tomorrow on the screen. In the morning, we're going to start out with folks from our hazardous waste section, our DAQ on compliance insights, DEMLR, big one this year coming up, electronic submission of your stormwater results. Looks like that's finally going to be happening. So again, if you'll fill out our survey, looks like I wasn't sharing my agenda for tomorrow. Sorry, folks. If you'll fill out the survey on the way out about today's sessions, again, you'll use the same link for tomorrow's stuff, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9:30. Thank you, everyone.